And we're on the air. There we go. Now we're cooking.
Oh, I'm cooking all right.
I'm not even gonna worry about audio today. We're just gonna do it. Okay. Welcome to Tech Twice Weekly for August 11th, 2014. My name is Ben White, and welcome to the show. This is a technology news podcast bringing you the latest headlines and discussing them twice a week, every Monday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Pacific Time. Once again, I'm joined by my friend Eric Fee. How's it going today, man?
Namwa, as they'd say.
I'm guessing that means something about being warm and uncomfortable. Is that about right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's got up to around 100 degrees here in Portland today, and uncomfortable is just the beginning of it, especially here in both of our home studios. It is not a comfortable place to be. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter show than we've had the past couple of days. Hopefully we'll be back to our regular format for Thursday's show. I've also had a switch in my setup here, just moved over from Windows 8.1 over to running Ubuntu Linux 14.04. And while I've got most of the kinks ironed out, there's still a couple of problems I'm working on figuring out. So right now, we're just going to run bare bones here today and jump into the news stories. Now, I want to start out today's show with a little bit of a sad piece of news. It's being reported by The Verge and many other media outlets that the actor Robin Williams has died of an apparent suicide attempt this afternoon. I personally grew up as a big fan of Robin Williams' comedy, both his stand-up and in feature films, and I truly appreciated his style of comedy that not only made you laugh, but often made you think. And honestly, I think the world really lost another great funny man today. So before we get started and get into all of our headlines, I just want to stop for a moment at the top of the show and take a moment of silence for his passing in recognition of all the comedy and laughs that he's given us. All right, thank you, everyone. And now let's go ahead and move on into our headlines. CNET is covering news out of California about a bill mandating manufacturers of smartphones add anti-theft software to their devices. The bill, passed by California's Senate on Monday, is on its way to the governor's desk for final approval. If signed into law by the governor, the bill would require all smartphones sold in the state of California or produced after July 2015 to include anti-theft software. California isn't the first state to propose such legislation either, though, as Minnesota passed a similar smartphone anti-theft law in May. These types of laws are creating a lot of pushback from both the software developers and wireless carriers over concerns that the kill switch anti-theft software could potentially be exploited by hackers to disable someone's phone. Versus has a review of a new iOS app called Sketch Factor. This new app is creating a lot of controversy as it's intended to notify users when they've entered a sketchy part of town. The concerns with this, however, is that many parts of a town considered sketchy are also parts of a town with obvious signs of poverty or may be divided among race lines. This could lead toward lowering a neighborhood's appeal even further, and since anyone can submit information or make edits, there's no factual basis for any of the submissions. While it's not clear if this new app will actually take off and develop a long-term community of users, it will be interesting to see how its developers handle the criticism it generates. Android Central is covering T-Mobile's announcement of their new daily and weekly pay-as-you-go plan rates. The new plan prices minutes and SMS messages at 10 cents apiece and offers 4G LTE data in bundles. starting at $5 for 500 megabytes of 4G LTE data, which is good for 1 day, and $10 for 1 gigabyte of 4G LTE data, which is good for 7 days. The new pricing is set to go into place August 17th.
Hold on. What carrier was that? Did you say?
That's for T-Mobile. That's some new pricing structures they just announced. It brings their weekly and daily pay-as-you-go rates in line with their current monthly pay-as-you-go rates.
Man, those rates are terrible.
I believe they're marketed more towards international travelers rather than local people living within the country.
True. Although the data expiration is kind of bogus. In a lot of countries, when you pay up on a SIM card or something, you it lasts until you use it. So the pay as you go and pay first plans are actually relatively cheap, and most people use them. But with rates like that, that's a little bit excessive.
It does seem interesting to me to kind of almost arbitrarily put a time frame limit on the data bundles. I mean, if I buy 500 megabytes of data, why should it matter if I stretch that out over 7 days or or 2 weeks of just checking mail occasionally? It doesn't. 500 megabytes is 500 megabytes. It's not like it's going to hurt their data infrastructure in any way or saturate the network at all.
Well, it's not about the data usage at all. It's about the pricing. It's um, if you think about it, for a lot of people, they use 500 megabytes a month or even less. I mean, all they really do is app updates and stuff when they're randomly out and about. But most people connect to Wi-Fi when they're at work or school, and they don't really use data habitually. So if they didn't put a cap on it that was short, although a day is really short, then it could last for a while. And they, I would assume that they don't want to take away or make plans that are cheaper than their monthly, which is where they probably get the vast majority of their business.
That's a good point. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The last headline I want to cover today is from TechCrunch, and they are reporting on the mobile short term messaging app Snapchat becoming the third most popular social media application behind Instagram and Facebook, as reported by ComScore. Remembering back, Facebook previously offered to buy Snapchat for $3 billion, and it's now becoming clear why they decided to turn down that offer as more and more teens and millennials are picking up the app and adding it to their smartphones. All right, that's going to do it for our headlines this week. We're going to go ahead and skip our Tech Toys segment this week just because, honestly, it is too hot to stay in the studio very much longer. I hate to be honest, but it is too hot. And so, in the sake of not passing out and keeping everyone conscious and comfortable but best as possible, we're going to jump straight down to our discussion topics today. So the first topic I want to jump back to and get your opinion on, Eric, is the Sketch Factor app that's coming out to iOS. Do you have any thoughts about this pretty controversial application?
Well, first off, I'd like to say, as devil's advocate, you live where you live, and no one is more aware of the situation of an area than people who live there. But at the same time, I think it's kind of bullshit uh, to go around and say that places that you go through are, for some reason, uh, less hospitable or livable or worthy of attraction. Um, Even though there aren't that many bad neighborhoods, I believe, in Portland, at least not what I would consider worthy. There are definitely some places with lower income families and higher crime rates, and yes, those places some people may not want to live, but generally, Um, I really think that there's not a single place in Portland that doesn't have something to offer.
And I can definitely see that perspective, but at the same time, I think the big concern that an app like this generates is that people groups could use it to create isolation. So say somebody moves into the city and they're looking at an app like this to try and determine where they should live or what neighborhood to check out or maybe even where to spend their Friday night. And if your neighborhood starts getting flagged as sketchy on an app like this, um, then it certainly impacts people's choice to come out and spend time in that neighborhood and spend time at those local businesses and spend money in the neighborhood.
Well, that is true, um,
And
but
there's nothing to stop a rival business from marking their competitor as sketchy.
that's very true. That's a really good point. But one thing I would say is that, like I mentioned before, you usually know where you live. Um, Being a Portland native, I kind of know which places in Portland might be considered by some sketchy and which places wouldn't. And so even if this place was marking somewhere sketchy, I would know where to go and where not to go, and what businesses to go to and what not to go to. I think that the biggest problem is, uh, this really plays on uh, people's fears, and that's generally not seen as kosher.
Right. And I think the biggest users of this app are going to be travelers. I mean, I think people living in their own town, other than maybe to make jokes or things like that, probably wouldn't be big users of an app like this. But if you were someone who travels frequently for business, perhaps, or maybe moved into a new area for a new job, I could see turning to an application like this when you're looking for an apartment or looking for a new place to hang out after work and making your decisions based on the information in an app like this, whether or not it's actually accurate. And especially for someone new to a city, you don't know better.
That's very true. Um, and I can see why some people would have a beef with it. I kind of do, even though it wouldn't really do me much good at this point. Um, Although I think that a lot of times travelers tend to either stay close to where they're staying, go where their friends go, or to just outright explore. And explorers and people who like to go discover new areas probably wouldn't take this app very seriously. And people who stay in the area where their hotel or resort are will typically stay there regardless. And people with friends, well, they have the inside scoop, and the app is useless.
That's true, and I think that's a really good argument for why it's entirely possible that this app might not even take off, and all this controversy is really for naught. That it'll just be dead in the water, because if there isn't a community to pick it up, it really doesn't matter how controversial an app could potentially be if no one's using it. So the other discussion topic I want to fall back to is about the smartphone kill switch bill headed to the California governor. I can think of several reasons why I think this bill is fundamentally flawed. And considering a lot of the concerns are coming from the developer community, I was wondering if you'd have any thoughts on this proposed law, being that you're a programmer yourself.
Well, personally, I feel that it's not the hardware manufacturer's job to ensure that your device is not stolen. I believe that it should be the telecommunication company's job, actually. They have control over which devices are connecting to their networks. They have blacklists, and they can access hardware unique identification numbers for devices. when you report a device stolen, it should have its IMEI number blacklisted from all carriers um, until it's recovered, if it is recovered. That will not really help with um, phones that get stolen and shipped internationally, which is apparently, from what I understand, fairly common. But also at the same time, I think that's a different, slightly different industry than the people who sell a phone and take it to a pawn shop or to steal a phone and attempt to use it. Um, if if telecommunication companies got their ducks in a row, they could easily already have this done without any changes to phones, and it would not only work with smartphones but also regular dumb phones, quote unquote. So I think that this bill is flawed simply in the fact that it's attacking the problem in my opinion, the wrong way.
Well, exactly. And the first question that comes to mind to me is how, if the goal of this bill is to stop thieves from stealing a phone, then I don't see this is fixing anything, because realistically, if someone steals your phone, I don't understand how any piece of software on it is going to make a difference, because once you report it stolen, I'm assuming that these um, kill switch tools are only intended to be activated by carriers. But if they kill a phone remotely, and then someone brings in the phone to the store and says, "Hey, my phone isn't working," they're going to check the IMEI number on it. In theory, it's going to show up in a blacklist reported as stolen. Do they then confiscate the phone and return it to the owner? I'm not really expecting that. And if they're not going to go that far into the whole process, then they're really not actually helping anything, because all it's going to do is someone's going to steal the phone, it's going to be shut down, and someone's going to toss it, or they're going to sell it for parts to fix other phones. And I don't think this law is going to reduce or slow down phone theft at all whatsoever.
Well, I mean, the argument could be made that if stealing phones does not yield a working phone, then the incentive to steal a phone would go down. And that may or may not be true, but
It certainly isn't true with cars. I mean,
well,
people put kill switches on cars all the time, and then they just turn into scrap, and they sell them for parts.
that's true. The chop shop, um, that's true. And cars are becoming very, very difficult to steal nowadays. But I was going to say that if it again goes back to identification numbers and carriers, then it really isn't. Then a change to the phone's software really isn't necessary in the first place. So why would you mandate it? And not only that, but of course the tinfoil hat theory. If they can turn my phone off because it's stolen, can they turn it off because I'm on the terrorist watch list, or I'm suspected of treason, or I'm just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or whatever? So there's that argument, which I don't
Or even
disagree.
if you owe money.
Actually, that's a good point. Which is funny because if you, for example, owing money, if you are back on child support by enough, in many states you can be arrested. But then the question goes, well, how are you supposed to pay it back if you're in jail?
It's a
Um,
little bit of a catch-22.
yeah, and it's like that a lot of ways with these devices, and not to mention that Android phones already support something similar to this. You can remotely lock, wipe, and ring your phone from the Android device manager. So if your phone gets stolen and you are quick, you can get to a terminal and then wipe its data. Um,
And not to mention, Android phones have data encryption that you can optionally turn on available as well, making sure the handset could technically be formatted and reused, but it protects the original owner's data from being taken, which ultimately I think is the most important thing that needs to be secured.
Agreed. I don't want someone scooping my data off of the internal. the SD card or the internal storage by simply soldering a couple of connections on. Um, so I actually have encryption turned on my phone, and other than having to enter a passcode, which is no different than, for example, and doing a PIN or the swipe code thing, um, my phone is encrypted. So if it does get stolen and I remote wipe it, then it should be, my data should be clear, which is of course much more important to me than the handset, which is just another device.
Exactly. And we've been able to deal with hardware theft for a long time. I mean, there's an entire industry built around phone insurance for theft. And I think that takes care of the problem as is. If this was such a terrible industry and theft was so rampant, then not only would phone insurance be astronomical, but it wouldn't be profitable for these insurance companies to offer insurance at the relatively affordable rates they are now. I mean, pricing insurance is based on the value of what's being insured, and it costs. I'm paying for full coverage in my car around $115 a month. Well, that my car is worth around $10,000 if they had to pay out for it. My phone, probably not quite so much.
Well, insurance is typically a very complex calculation, not just how much something is worth on the singular, but also the replacement rates in total. Not only are phones inexpensive devices, they're much less expensive to insurance companies and telecoms than they are to us, unfortunately. But also, um, if the theft rate is low, regardless of the device price, then the insurance rate can be low because they only have to replace X amount. Um, but as far as this bill goes, they're targeting manufacturers because manufacturers are easier to target than telecoms. Telecoms fight tooth and nail for every single penny, and manufacturers are used to being bullied not only by others but also by each other. So I think that this bill is uh, good intentioned but poor execution, and that, of course, is like a lot of law, unfortunately.
Well, and I wonder how quickly that cell phone hackers, the people in like the CyanogenMod community who make an alternative ROM for Android phones, are going to find a way to disable this sort of software-based kill switch, or even a hardware-based kill switch if they remove the software calls to it. If I take the factory installed ROM off the phone and put CyanogenMod that doesn't talk to this kill switch, does that render the kill switch useless? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't know why they think this is a good idea, but it's just a waste of money. And not only that, but it also has those possible security implications I mentioned, which is of course also unfortunate.
I think at the end of the day, this is really legislature aimed at letting everyone involved pat themselves on the back and say they're doing something good and say they're doing something helpful. And when you live in that political world and you live in the vacuum that is politics, sure, isolated from reality, protecting people's phones from theft is a good thing. I don't think there's any argument there. But when you take reality into account and how this fix is being implemented, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, this is part of an age-old problem of non-technologists making technology-based law, and the fact that our laws are not vetted by any type of scientific review uh, is unfortunate.
Well, and realistically, I think it's going to come down to the age old problem of technology outpacing law. And this will pass, this is going to become law, and the manufacturers are going to do what they have to do to meet law requirements. But then when you create a better lock, all the thieves do is find a better way to break into it. It's a continuous game of cat and mouse, and it isn't going to just end because somebody decides to put some different software involved.
Well, security researchers often uh, quantify security based on how much money it costs to break it. And you develop security not that is you think is unbreakable, because nothing is unbreakable. You try and develop security so expensive that it's not worth the cost of manpower, expertise, time, equipment, and skills to break.
That's a good point, because when you have a bank, your vault doesn't have to be impenetrable. It simply has to take long enough to break into it that police are able to respond to the alarm. And I think you're completely correct. This is going to be the same way, that ultimately, if we were to continue down this path, the logical progression would be developing anti-theft tools that protect the phone in such a way that it isn't worth the time investment or resource investment to make the phone functional again once it's been stolen and those anti-theft controls have been activated.
Uh, for example, a lot of cars nowadays have the security and immobilizer integrated so deeply into the car's computer system, and the computer system is irrevocably connected uh, to the engine, i.e., you cannot turn the car on without the computer. You can't start that. You can't get access to the computer without the proper key and microchip. And to break into and steal and drive that car away, it costs so much money that you can just buy a car, and it costs money and expertise. You have to have expert tools for getting into the car. You have to have a replacement ECU with the immobilizer deactivated, or somehow to deactivate the immobilizer when you're on site, which is can be expensive and time consuming and requires vast amounts of expertise. So much so that, for example, my old Volkswagen could not you couldn't steal it to drive it away unless you were literally a car hacker. Um, in so much that it's just not even worth stealing. It's much better to just break into it and steal everything into it that you can take out, or to tow it away in a Faraday cage, which, by the way, is done.
Wow, that's a interesting thought, to steal a car in a Faraday cage, but I guess it depends on how badly you want that car, right?
It happens a lot with motorcycles,
Interesting. That's
because when a motorcycle is low jack, see, motorcycles are really easy to steal in compared to a car.
sure, you can almost lift them and walk away with them in some cases, depending on the motorcycle.
Exactly. The only catch, though, is low jack and other tracking type software. And to do so, all you need is a box truck, a box truck with a little bit of lining in the back, and you can easily walk away with any motorcycle, low jack or not. Deactivate the low jack, and then scratch off the VIN, and you have a motorcycle. You have a track day bike or whatever. You part out. There's a zillion things people do to motorcycles. Usually, they just drive it into the ground, and don't get pulled over. And if they do get pulled over, well, who knows? But that thing's pretty common in motorcycles.
Wow, that's crazy. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with the kill switch bill. I unfortunately think that the governor is probably going to sign off on this, get to wave the banner of doing a good thing, even though they simply don't understand what they're doing and why it's not actually helpful. And of course, there'll be no repercussions when that's proved to be ineffective down the road, so nobody will follow up with them and hold them accountable to that, because that's just not the way politics in the United States work. But so, on that lovely positive note, um, I think we're going to go ahead and call it a day here at the show. I know the show's been super short, and I apologize. Like I said, I hope we're back to our regularly scheduled formula, as it were, come Thursday. We'll be back Thursday at our. I'll be early actually. It'll be early this week, trying to get a show in probably 5:30 or 6. But don't worry about that. The show will be out on our RSS feed, accessible through the website at techtwiceweekly.com. We've got our subreddit set up, techtwiceweekly.reddit.com. Currently not a lot in there. Plan to start getting our show stories posted in there, make them real easy to find. And again, if you have any questions or want to submit articles to the show, the subreddit's a great place to go, or email them in directly, feedback@techtwiceweekly.com. Anything you want to share with the audience, Eric?
I bought a Jeep.
I saw that, a red one at that.
Yeah, even though I don't like red cars, I have two of them.
I was surprised actually. It was a Jeep Cherokee, right?
Correct. A 1997 Cherokee XJ, two-door, two-wheel drive. I know, two-wheel drive, boo. 5-speed, and it was in immaculate condition, and the transmission feels like it's brand new. Ah, so nice.
I was surprised because originally when you mentioned you were looking for a Jeep, I misunderstood. I think the Jeep you wanted, and I was thinking you were wanting one of the more traditional sport Jeeps, like you see people driving around in. But you're looking for something a little more practical. It sounds like. So I'm I'm guessing that means you didn't hear a word I just said as I got distracted there for a minute.
I heard you. I apologize. Yeah, it's a Cherokee. It's actually really nice. It's a 4-liter. It gets okay gas mileage. I hope to eke out some more with the 5-speed. And it's not that heavy either. It's actually pretty nice. I'll get you behind the wheel soon enough.
Well, there's no reason to put me behind the wheel of a nice car with a good transmission. Let's get me started on behind the wheel of your truck with a okay transmission.
Uh, that thing is such a piece.
Has it gotten better since you replaced the transmission in it?
Yeah, it now actually shifts. You don't have to avoid clutch every shift.
I guess that sounds like a positive.
Oh yeah.
Well, before we spin this off too deeply into a car talk show, maybe that's a podcast for another time waiting to happen. Um, maybe that's something we can look into. Car guy teaches guy who knows nothing about cars a thing or two. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight to everybody. For Eric Fee, I'm Ben White. Have a great night, everybody, and check us out, techtwiceweekly.com. Thanks for listening.